Well, we've already had our first snowfall this year, and the weather outside is getting so cold that this just isn't fun anymore. So I think it's time that we put this thing away for winter. Join me today as we do that.
Before the final ride of the season, I add a few ounces of fuel stabilizer to the tank. This ensures that all of the items in the system are affected: the carbs, the filters, the lines, and the tank. I like to drain the fuel on all my small engines before storage, and especially this bike. If I don't ride next year, this means that the fuel in the system will be over 2 years old or more before running again. Towards the end of this ride, the bike was showing signs of fuel starvation, so I knew it was time to head home. I generally get about 120 miles of travel before worrying about the fuel level. Here, you can hear that the bike is stumbling and only running on one cylinder. This is a safety measure built into the system. This bike doesn't have a fuel gauge, so when the level drops below a certain point, one of the carburetors will cut out. When this loss of power happens, I rotate the fuel selector switch from the on position to the reserve position. You can clearly hear that the second cylinder has come back online by doing this. In a few moments I will demonstrate this selector switch in detail, but for the meantime, I'm removing as much fuel as I can with my small hand pump. While the bike is still running out of fuel, I begin removing the leather pieces. I store these pieces in a warm, dry basement for the winter. I've turned the bike around for the next step. I take advantage of the natural slope of the garage floor to help the engine oil drain easily. The fill cap is located on top of the clutch pack housing. Using my "I'm gonna spill and make a mess" pans, I get started with the oil change. This oil looks fairly clean. I did not put a lot of miles on the bike this summer, but I still wish to change it now. The oil still has byproducts of combustion in it, and if left sitting could cause corrosion of the internal parts. In this bike, the oil is used to lubricate both the engine and the transmission. Tipping the bike upright off its side stand helps to remove the final few ounces. This strap wrench makes removing the oil filter easy. The front of this engine gets very dirty. It is directly behind the front wheel and receives all of the dirt, grime, and rubber that the road has to offer. And yes, I am using a toothbrush with some brake cleaner to help remove the majority of the dirt. Some of you call me picky, but it will help me spot any oil leaks around the oil filter next spring. A dab of oil on the new filter and it's ready to install. On my cars I pre-fill the filters, but with this orientation most of the oil would just pour out, so I install it empty. There is no dipstick on the bike, just the sight glass with level marks for high and low. While pouring, this sight glass will rise and fall. When I get near the end of pouring the indicated 3.4 liters, I slow down. Tilting the bike upright off the side stand shows the current level. It might look a little high now, but remember, the oil filter is still empty. I will ensure a proper level next spring before the first and every ride. The last step for the fuel system will be to empty both carburetors of all the fuel to ensure that both bowls will be dry and the floats to drop, allowing the needles to come out of the seats. I've been doing this step now for 21 years and I've never had a problem starting the bike in the springtime. In order to access the spark plugs, I must first remove the fuel tank. This 10mm bolt is all that secures it to the frame. Lifting the back of the tank slightly allows me access to the two fuel lines connected to the fuel selector switch. The vent tube on the right-hand side seems to drop off automatically. These two rubber pucks fit into two cups on the inside of the tank, and together with the bolt, holds it on. Now this step is not part of the winterization process. I'm removing the fuel selector switch to illustrate what happens when the bike is running out of fuel. There are two fuel pickup tubes, a long one and a short one. The long tube is connected to the on circuit on the switch, and the short one is connected to the reserve circuit on the switch. When the fuel level drops below the on circuit filter, the bike begins to stumble and one cylinder cuts out. Switching to the reserve circuit means my next destination is a fuel filling station. Removing the battery involves removing the front frame clip. This clip holds the front of a tray that holds the battery securely in place. The tray also holds a fuse block and the flasher module for the turn signals. I start by removing the negative cable. I am touching the frame with the wrench, and if I was on the positive post, I would be setting off a fireworks show, the likes of which the Walt Disney Corporation would be jealous of. I am reattaching the nuts and bolts together with the cables to eliminate the inevitable 4-hour search for these in the springtime. So, to recap, the negative cable first to remove the battery, and the positive cable first to install the battery. And now, onto the spark plugs. The plugs are hidden deep within the cylinder heads, so before removing them, I use a blast of air to clean the areas of all the dead bugs, dirt, and leaves. A universal joint attached to the spark plug socket allows me to get into the void and work around the breather hoses. The plugs are a few years old now, but aside from a little dirt, they seem fine to continue using them. The electrodes do not show any sign of wearing out yet. With the plugs still out, I inject some of this liquid rust prevention into the cylinders. This helps prevent sticking rings and pistons for the first start next spring. In order to service the air filter, I have to remove this right-hand side cover. The filter lives inside the airbox behind this second cover. For the most part, this filter is not dirty enough to worry about. I rarely drive off the paved roads. But every few years I wash the foam elements in dish detergent to clean them. Looking inside the airbox, this too looks clean. Again, not a lot of miles put on the bike this summer. There is a rubber grommet on the frame that a post in the side cover pops into. The rear of the cover slips into a clip behind the shock tower, and the only real mechanical fastener is this screw in the bottom. The bike's engine is liquid cooled, so testing the antifreeze property of the coolant is next. The coolant overflow bottle is hidden behind this cover. I used to own a Volkswagen, and it required a very special, very expensive coolant. So instead of wasting the leftovers, I switched out the original glycol-based fluid for this hybrid organic acid technology coolant. Important to note, however, very important, to completely flush the glycol out of the system. These fluids do not mix and will leave the entire cooling system full of a gelatinous goo. It won't get down to temperatures this cold inside my garage this winter. The last of the leather removal, this front headlight bag. It's funny to note that with this bag attached, my motorcycle has more glove box space than my Mazda MX-5. I'm covering the exhaust tips for two reasons. One, to prevent any little visitors from getting in and making a home. Not that I've seen any in my garage, but just in case. And two, to prevent moisture from getting in and causing corrosion. One thing I do to all my tires is to inflate them for the storage season. The sidewalls caution inflating beyond 40 psi, so 35 psi is my target here for both back and front tires. Last step in the garage is to cover the bike using the soft cloth cover. However, I don't have one for the sports car because I'm afraid of scratching the paint. Now every time I look at the bike under the cover, it will remind me of just how much winter sucks. This is where the battery will live for the next few months. Once a week, I'll attach this trickle charger to it for a few hours. And with that, I will say goodbye until next spring. Thank you for joining me today behind the red door.